Unless you're starting the project yourself, usually the first step to working on a Git-based project is going to be cloning the repository to your local computer and telling it about the remote repositories you need to work with. In Git, this is accomplished with a couple of easy commands. Let's see what that process looks like. Normally, when people talk about remote repositories, they're talking about a repository that's on another computer that they have access to over the network, hence the word remote. This doesn't have to be the case, though. To Git, remote really just means somewhere else. All the commands that we're going to work with here will work for repositories located on another computer, but since I want you to follow along with me and I can't guarantee that you have another computer handy, we're going to work with two repositories that are located on the same computer in different folders. Here in my home directory, you can see that I've got the My Really Cool Project repository that we've been working in. Let's pretend that this is now someone else's repository, and we need to clone that repository so that we can work on the project with them in parallel. Much like all the other commands we've learned for Git, this one is pretty simple. We're going to use git clone. Of course, we have to tell Git what to clone. If you're working with a repository that's hosted on another computer, this will typically be some kind of network address. We're not working over the network right now, so we can just tell it to clone the My Really Cool Project repository that's in our home directory. If we want, we can also provide an optional argument that says what we want our copy of the repository to be named. Remember that, in Git, the name of a repository isn't important, so we can use something different if we want. In order to keep things from being confusing, I'm going to call this new clone our clone project. Git gives us a success message, and if we look at the contents of our home directory, we can see that there's now an Our Clone Project folder. Let's look at what's inside that directory. Much like we'd expect, all of our project files are here, and if we look at our Git log, we can see that we have access to all of our project history as well. Git has created a perfect copy of our original repository. We can make commits, create and merge branches, and do everything else that we've learned how to do with the Git repository so far. We didn't just create a copy of the original repository, though. Git has automatically set up our original repository as a remote repository when it created this one. If we run the git remote command, we can see a list of all the remotes available to this repository. Right now there's only one, and it's named Origin. When you clone a repository, Git automatically creates a remote named Origin for you. It uses the word origin because your repository originated as a copy of that particular remote. Do you think it automatically added our new repository as a remote for our original one? Let's find out. I'm going to switch back to My Really Cool Project. Remember that our new clone is named Our Clone Project. And we'll run the git remote command. Nothing gets printed out. This means that our original repository isn't affected at all by the clone. Cloning creates a copy of the repository without changing it in any way. This can be really handy for big projects that lots of people might want to look at. You wouldn't want to have your repository change every time somebody decided they wanted to look at a copy of the code themselves. But for us, it isn't great. We want our two repositories to be able to talk to each other, and right now, My Really Cool Project has no idea that Our Clone Project exists. We can fix this by manually adding a remote repository. This is accomplished by making use of the git remote add command. We have to provide a name for our remote. Remember that Git automatically used origin in our clone, but that wouldn't be appropriate here since My Really Cool Project didn't originate as a copy of Our Clone Project. So I'm just going to use Our Clone. We also have to provide the path to the remote. And again, this could just as easily be a valid network path, but we're going to use the local directory name instead. When that command runs successfully, we list our remotes and can see that we've successfully set up our repositories to talk to each other. Now we're all set up to work on our repository. We can make some changes, maybe add a branch or two, but what do we do when we're done? How do we make sure we're up to date with the latest work that the other team members have been doing? In the next video, we'll walk through the process of pushing and pulling changes between repositories.